Thank you, everyone. It's my first time here at ClueCon and the first time in America as well, so good to be here. And look, what I really want to talk about today is about a time when I had to bring back a project called Kazoo through a community. Basically the whys, the hows, and the lessons learned. And I hope you get out of this just a little bit inspired and a little bit more involved in the community side of the projects that you're all involved in. I know it's always hard after lunch, but show of hands, who's actually heard of Kazoo before? Almost everyone. So I can skip over some things, which is good. But any good learning starts with a good README. But ultimately, why am I here talking about this? I've got 25 years of IT experience. I currently am managing partner of Computer Consultant Professionals, which is a mouthful, so we just call it CCP these days. And it's a MSP focusing on cybersecurity management, all that kind of stuff. I've been working in VoIP for over 20 years. I started with IINet, one of Australia's largest internet service providers, and started working on building my own telecom infrastructure through like Asterisk, Free PBX, Fusion PBX, and eventually Kazoo as well. I've also spent about 10 years contributing back to open source, not always in the best code or with the best bug reports. A lot of them got rejected, especially in the early days. But I love doing it, and I've got a really good passion for it. I also started the Kazoo Classic project as well. And it's a project that I really believe in, and I'm really passionate about. And nothing says it more than traveling from as far away from Chicago as you can get, which is Perth. And don't worry, if you don't understand kilometers, there it is in miles. And if you like Star Wars and you measure distance in time, it's that many milliseconds to get here. But we can skip a little bit over what is Kazoo. All right. It's an open source scalable PBX. They call it a UCaaS product, mostly because they're trying to host it all themselves these days. It was launched, I think, about 13 years ago. At least that's when they posted on Reddit that they had officially launched. And it's really just glue that binds all these other open source projects together. So Camelio, FreeSwitch, and everything else you see there. And I've been running it in my own business for about 10 years. Now, when they first started Kazoo, they touted that the purpose behind it was, we want a platform that a two-man startup can spin up in 10 minutes, or is powerful enough to power telecommunications for a country, right? That was the goal, a big vision, right? But no free ads. So in order for us to have a reason to spawn a community project around Kazoo, something needed to have happened. So we need to go back about 5 years to see what happened with Kazoo. That might be a little bit small on those screens, but I'll read it all out, it's all good. In about 2020, they went from their version 4.3 and announced version 5. But in a stark change from what they'd done before, they moved to close to public commits. So if you wanted to commit to the project, you can't. But what it also meant is all the commits they were doing were behind the scenes and you couldn't see it either. So they've gone from an open source model to a closed source model. Now they will say, we're still going to release version 5. It will come out, we're still an open source company. And their original reasoning for it was, we don't want to deal with a whole bunch of bug reports about unfinished code and you know, we want it polished, we want to release an application store, all these sorts of things before the community gets their hands on it. And we all turned around and went, yeah, okay, fair enough. We'll put some polish on it as long as we eventually get it one day. So 2021 comes around, they're still developing it, you know, things take time, I understand. It's still not ready for open source. And towards the tail end of 2021, they started ignoring pull requests and bug fixes and things like that for version 4.3. Now, again, we can understand that. Their focus is on version 5. You know, they want to put all their development time into that, and 4.3 is done. So, all right, fair enough. They're still talking to us. They're being open in the forums and the community. They're giving like rough timelines. They don't want to give any ETAs. We as developers all know the second you give someone an ETA, it's a deadline, right? They'll hold you to it. And then in 2022, we move along another year, and we get more assurances of it's coming soon. But they get a bit more sketchy with their ETAs. They make sure to tamper expectations, which is fine. But it does start to bring up the community discussion around, does this violate, if not the licensing of open source, but the spirit of open source? You know, they built their product on open source projects. Other people did commits and helped them build their product. Even if it was small, it was still contributing to their product. And yet they're not releasing anything back to the community now. You know, and they managed to skirt around the licensing in a perfectly valid way of never distributing the code. So as long as they host the platform and they call it a UCAS product, then they don't have to release the version that they're operating on, right? That would be, you know, if they were to distribute it and not release it, that would be bad as like redistributing and reselling free switch enterprise, right? Which you wouldn't do. We move on to 2023, and now people start to get worried because Kazoo is based on CentOS 7. That was the last build for it. And in 2024, which is coming up, we hit end of life. And so everyone starts to do their end of life planning, right? They continue to say that, you know, it's super duper important and all that kind of stuff. 2600 Hertz gets acquired by UMA as well. And I jumped on that UMA call, and they finished off with, you know, we're very devoted to the community, that we started off as open source ourselves, and we want to give back. And now we have all the resources, we've bought it, we've got a bunch more developers. Let's get V5 done. Great news. 2024 happens, it's still not out, CentOS 7 hits end of life. And unless something happened this morning, it's still not out. So, I'm running Kazoo for my business. Now, I'm only running it for a small number of people. I've only got about 300 users on my platform. But I'm based around cybersecurity and compliance. So I need to run things off the latest versions of things, right? Or definitely not end of life. So what do I do? All right, everyone here, I assume in some manner of speaking, runs open source in production to deliver some sort of service or product to all of their clients. And you could imagine if this wasn't Kazoo, this was FreeSwitch, right? 5 years ago, FreeSwitch didn't publish any more updates, but said they will release it soon. What would you do if all of a sudden your stuff is running on end-of-life software, I should say, and you've got no path forward? Probably just keep running end-of-life software, right? So we faced a whole bunch of challenges coming from, as I mentioned, we can't be running end-of-life or it makes us hypocrites in our industry. We've got platform-specific features that our clients love. And we've built a whole bunch of custom integrations, you know, things that do all our billing for us and all that kind of stuff as well. And now we're uncertain in the future of the software. All right, so to go forward, I saw only really 3 options. We pay for Kazoo Enterprise, which is a perfectly valid option. The only issue we had is we worked out good pricing with UMA, but all their support was US hours only. Now, coming from Australia, that's a 12-hour difference. So you're in production, you wake up in the morning, your phones aren't working, you don't run the infrastructure anymore because you're paying for enterprise. What do? Submit a support ticket and wait 24 hours? You're going to lose all your customers that way, right? Not to mention, I mentioned before about 280 milliseconds to get here. Well, that's one way, right? And then we've got to go back to our carrier. That's another 280 milliseconds. That's our your voice agents are faster than that latency going back and forth between Australia and the US. We could use another PBX platform, like virtual PBX or Asterix or all those sorts of things. But we'd have to redo all that code. We'd have to redo all those integrations. We'd have to learn a new platform. We'd lose some features that our clients had on the existing one. Or we can maintain Kazoo 4.3 going forward. But I'm also a relatively small business, and I don't have a suite of Erlang developers at my beck and call, unfortunately. And so we were stuck for time, resources, and expertise. So I was about ready to just go, well, I guess we won't do Telecom anymore. We'll just hand it off to someone else and say sorry to our clients and move along. But thankfully, a fourth option opened up for me, and it came with the one thought of, I cannot be alone in this. I can't be the only one out there experiencing these sets of problems. Now, OpenLogic did a survey this year, which thankfully shows that open source software is not dying. It's, in fact, on the rise, with 96% of all surveyed businesses either maintaining their current level of open source software usage or massively increasing it. But more importantly is about a quarter of them all were running end-of-life CentOS to keep their product stack running. So I decided to do a bit of digging, and I just went through I think there's about 500 forks of Kazoo, and then there's forks of those forks. But I went through them and tried to find people who had done good work inside of those forks. People who had updated Erlang OTP versions, who had solved some of the other closed-sourced aspects of Kazoo, because they have a proprietary database for Kama-Ilio for some reason. But people had already solved some of the problems I was facing. And then finally, there's people complaining on the forums and in IRC if you're over 40. But everyone was doing this in silos, right? They're all doing it on their own. So I thought, why not build a community effort towards bringing this back, right? Bringing it up to date, and then bringing it forward beyond there. The first thought I have with anything is always, it's too bloody hard, right? Or, look, I'm running a business, I don't have enough time, I barely have enough time to get to a conference, right? Let alone start a community. And then the other thought is, look, it's easy to complain on a forum. There could be 100 people complaining on a forum, but how many of them are going to want to contribute to solving the problem? Probably a very small number, right? I'm also not an expert. If I should put in a dangerous demo, right? Because I'm dangerous enough to be able to read and write Erlang, but you would never want to put it in production, that's for sure. And then ultimately, where do I begin? And of course, always the way to begin is by beginning. And I had a business coach up until a couple of years ago who used to always parrot this one phrase, which was version 1 is better than version none. So you can spend all day saying why and why not, but until you actually get started, you won't know what works and what doesn't. And so I set up a Discord server. I posted on the forums, I posted on Reddit, anywhere I would go to learn, talk, or find out about PBXs and VoIP and all that kind of stuff. I posted about it. I said, here's what I'm doing. I'd love you to come along. In addition to that, I went one step further. I tracked down those people. I felt like a bit of a stalker. But those people that built those forks that made progress, I found out either their contact details or where they worked and reached out to them to find their contact details. Like I said, a bit of a stalker, I know. But I reached out to them and I said, hey, this is what I'm doing. Would you like to come and join? And I thought I'd get ghosted or ignored or called a stalker. But encouragingly, they all jumped on board. They're like, I love this. We've been struggling with this on our own, and we'd love to go in it together with a community. And so from there, it was about putting together those people that knew the path forward already. They knew the challenges we were going to face, and they knew a decent direction for us to go. They had slight differences of opinion, but we put all those kinds of people together into an advisory group. And then I grabbed all those people who were great at coding, who had the expertise, and I put them all together into a contributors group. And that way they could avoid duplicating the work that they were doing, because there was a lot of duplication when it was being done in silos. And then we went together and we built a little bit of a roadmap, even if it was an alpha. Like I said, version 1's better than version none. We can always change it later as we go along, and it has changed over the past few months. And then ultimately, all I had to do was make sure people were heard and understood and were given some direction. The most important part with this community was not telling anyone to do anything, just sharing a vision, sharing a set of goals, and saying this is where we're trying to go. And so despite myself still being time poor, I spent 3 months early this year with a torn ACL and fractured arm, all laid up, couldn't do anything. The community continued to go strong, even in those absences. Right? We get no support from 2600 Hertz or UMA. They won't even talk to us. I've tried. And we've got, over 80 members at the moment, which is good. And a lot of them are still learning the platform. They've never even touched the platform before, but we're there to help them to learn, because they will pay back in dividends down the line. Because I remember where I started with Kazoo, I was asking the dumbest of questions. Trust me. But in addition, we've also got some of the most skilled developers in there as well. People that have already ported the platform to newer Erlang versions, people that have solved, stir shaken, even if that's still a version 1, right? And more so, we've got a plan to go forward. So, good story. Tell it to your kids tonight, it'll put them right to sleep. But what's in it for you? So there's a few lessons I pulled out from this. And really, I wish we'd built this community not out of a shared frustration. I think that was the worst thing of it, is while it was a good driver, I do think about, if I started this effort 5 years ago, would it have succeeded? And probably not, if I was the one trying to build it. But I think 2600 Hertz, or UMA now, really left a lot on the floor. And I think when communities are done right, everyone can benefit far more than what they put in, right? I think the what's in it for me aspect when people approach open source is the wrong mindset. So, how do we wrap this up into some key takeaways for the different kinds of people that I know we've got here? Right? If you're an individual or a small group of developers, it's easy to put in bug fixes and pull requests and all that kind of stuff. But consider engaging with the communities, being mentors to some of those newer individuals that have all those really, really dumb questions, even though it's frustrating at times. Just think back to the kind of mentoring you wish you had when you first started, working with FreeSwitch or Kamailio. I remember my first times, my questions were dumb, and the answers that I got were so much higher level than what I was expecting. I felt like I was belittled and criticized, and I didn't want to engage anymore. But luckily, I'm stubborn-headed and I persisted, right? But in return, what you get out of it is you've got a group to learn from. Nobody here is going to be an expert in everything. And a platform like Kazoo brings so many components together. Nobody in our group understands every aspect of it 100%. And so we bounce off each other and we solve problems together. Right? It obviously does things like builds your portfolio, gives you recognition, and gives you job opportunities down the track. Because if you're a top contributor for Kazoo or FreeSwitch, you end up starting your own company, or SignalWire will want to hire you because you already know their code base. If you're a VAO SSSP, which I coined, we need more acronyms, of course. But if you're a business that operates off open source, right? Same thing again, if you have an in-house development team, give them time to contribute back to the open source projects that you're taking from, right? I know some of you will be protective of your intellectual property and things that give you the edge, which is all fair enough. But any smaller code improvements and things like that when it's committed back to the open source projects themselves, they get maintained by the community. It's not just then on your back, and when the next version comes out, you have to go and unit test every single thing again. A lot of that's going to be a part of the updates of the main open source project. And you can be community leaders as well, be good voices, build educational resources, how-tos, all those kinds of things. And then, of course, out of that, you get your accelerated development. You build credibility and trust in the community. There's a lot of names that everyone already knows here at the conference as well. And that's done by being engaged, right? And of course, if you're backing, the enterprise versions of things or donating to these projects, then you've got some influence over the roadmap and where those projects go as well. And then finally, I'll wrap it up. But if you're SignalWire or UMA themselves, or any other organization that builds an open source project, right, you have the most power and the most influence to do these things, and have possibly the most to gain as well. It's easy to look at massive multi-million-dollar telecom companies using your open source projects that they don't commit back and feel a bit bitter about it. But if you spend all day doing that, you won't get anywhere. But you already open your code base, you already give governance and leadership. I'm just asking to put a little bit more effort into the communities that are around your projects and foster them. You'll end up with a global pool of developers. You'll have people using your system in new and wacky ways. You'll have all these edge cases tested for you. And most importantly, that hiring pipeline I spoke about. If you bring on a new developer to a code base and they don't know it, the time it takes them to get caught up is immense. You're going to be spending months, if not years, for them to get fully caught up. But if you've got someone in that community that's a team player, they're contributing, they're mentoring others, I don't see why you wouldn't hire them immediately, right? Save a lot of time. So, communities are people, basically, and people are worth investing in. And so the best way to do it is just get started, get organized, and understand you're not alone. In a lot of these cases, all you have to do is give it its support, and the community will build itself. My interaction with the Kazoo Classic community has been, middle to mid, right? And everyone else has been firing off on all cylinders, even while I've been here at the conference. So it's been amazing to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we've got young Bodie coming up next, but I think we have time for a question or two. If anybody would like to pose a question to Tim, if you raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you. Look, Nick's there, like a coiled spring, ready with a microphone. Has anybody got a question they would like to ask? Doesn't look like it. Are you here for the rest of the conference, Tim?
Yes, I am.
All the way from Australia. Another big thank you to Tim.